meeting of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. The National Committee meeting, Executive Committee meeting, which took place from the 27th of February to the 1st of March yesterday, was the first meeting of the NEC in the year 2023. The leadership of the Federation here with me would be reading an official statement, and thereof all colleagues will have an opportunity to pose questions, which we will also ask. To those joining us via the Facebook chat live, we will also be able to take your questions. You can pose them there. My name is Comrade Trevor Shagu. I'm the national spokesperson of SAFTU. I will hand over to the General Secretary to start reading the official statement. But before, let me introduce perhaps the leadership with me in front. Next to me is Comrade Ruth Mamulava Mtlokoza, who's the President of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Next to her rather, is Comrade Zwelinzi Mavavi, the General Secretary. And to the far right, we have Comrade Nondembeko Luzipo, who is the Deputy General Secretary of the Federation. Thank you, Comrade Nobale, you may start.
And we are missing the Deputy President of SAFTU who couldn't join, Comrade Musima Maredi, as well as the National Treasurer, Comrade Mutswari Lejogo. On our behalf and on behalf of the National Executive Committee, we're reading to you the key decisions of the National Executive Committee, which, as Trevor explained, took place between Monday and yesterday. And this NEC meeting was characterized by a very frank, robust, and yet comradely discussion and debates amongst the leaders of the Federation about the challenges facing the working people and the working class as a whole, but also a frank, robust, and comradely discussion about the challenges facing our country as a whole. The debates amongst comrades were guided by the equally robust Secretariat report and the discussion papers that were drafted by the leadership of the Federation to stimulate the discussions in the National Executive. These papers will be posted in our website in the near future. They include a paper adopted already by the National Executive Committee that took place on the 4th and 6th of July last year on the master plan of the Federation, the implementation plan of the Federation in between the Congresses, the integrated operational plan. Secondly, it was guided by a discussion paper on why the established trade unions are comfortable with the status quo and threatened by the rise of independent, younger federations that are militant and robust. Thirdly, a paper on the reflections of the federations on possible steps in pursuance of worker unity in South Africa, in a paper under the slogan of workers that says, "Workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains." The fourth paper is the state of the trade union movement 50 years after the 1973 Durban strikes. And lastly, we have also drafted a paper on SAFTU and NEDLEC on avoiding corporatist capture to facilitate a debate about how we will engage with the institution that we are getting into. SAFTU NEC unanimously agreed to categorize South Africa as a failed state. Let me repeat that. The SAFTU NEC unanimously agreed to categorize South Africa as a failed state. The evidence of a failed state is not only undeniable, but it's galling. The state has just become dysfunctional and unable to perform its most basic functions on many areas. We just quote few examples. Example number one is on the protecting citizens from the acts of criminality. The latest crime statistics show that we are losing a staggering 82 lives a day to violence, experience a frightening 135 people being raped every day, have a 549 people daily assaulted with perpetrators intending to cause grievous bodily harm, have a 464 residential houses that are broken into, and more than 68 households in which occupants are being hostage during house robberies. The criminal justice system is unable to bring the perpetrators to book. As we know, police has previously told Parliament that in all incidents of criminality, they are only able to identify 48% of the perpetrators, which means that 52% of the people who commit criminality in our country will never ever be identified. And the police have told Parliament previously that of the 48 people that they will arrest, the courts only convict 15% of them, meaning that the overwhelming majority of those that get arrested never get convicted in our courts. But for women and the rape survivors, the situation is even worse. The police have previously told Parliament that the courts are only able to convict 11% of people who are accused of raping women, children, elderly, or even raping other men. 11%. This doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, we believe, except in countries which have arrived in the place where we are today, a failed state. We also make an example about the collapsing state-owned enterprises. Having inherited well-oiled run state-owned enterprises from the apartheid and colonial era, the ANC government has squandered these important entities. Let me repeat that. Having inherited a well-oiled run state-owned enterprises from the apartheid and colonial era, the ANC government has squandered these important entities and left them in a sorry state they are in today. Having collapsed them, they are now selling them for a penny. We make a third example, load shedding. The collapse of the state-owned enterprises is the most glaring and affects ordinary people and workers with immediacy at Eskom. From the President's pronouncement, we have been plunged into permanent load shedding, we are told, for the coming 2 years. And even then, we are not sure whether they will solve this crisis after 2 years, bearing in mind that load shedding has been going on in our country for 15 years now, since 2007. We've had 3 presidents of the country and of the ANC who just couldn't solve the problem between 2007 and 2023. All of them combined. They were deputy presidents and they became presidents. All of them. The current president was a deputy president, was chairing the so-called war room where there was no war launched against load shedding. And the deputy president that has announced his departure also was given the same task to solve the crisis. He is leaving without the problem being solved. The other president who was there also promised us that we will never ever see load shedding again. But load shedding continues many years after he had said that. The other one who was very critical of the previous and the current president, he himself was there actually. That's where the ball started rolling under his own leadership. We are in that crisis. They can't solve load shedding for 15 years. And there is more years now coming under load shedding. The consequences to ordinary people can never ever be addressed fully in a single press conference or even a meeting. In the meantime, they are fast-tracking the sale of Eskom through independent power producers. According to the plan presented by Eskom to the Presidential Climate Change Commission, at the end of the unbundling, they will have sold 2/3 of Eskom distribution division and more than 2/3 of Eskom's generation division. That's what their plan is. That's what they have told the Presidential Climate Commission. At the end of this unbundling, they would have sold 2/3 of Eskom's distribution and more than 2/3 of Eskom generation division. That's what they are doing. It's not that they are collapsing. They are collapsing everything so that they can find reasons to sell all of the state enterprises to their friends in the private sector for a penny. We quote the 4th reason in the statement: the triple crisis of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities, plus corruption. So we're talking about not triple, but quadruple crisis of poverty, unemployment, inequality, and corruption. The expanded unemployment is still very high, above 42%, with the latest statistics from the last quarter of 2022, which means that more than 8.9 million young people between the ages of 15 and 34 are not in any form of employment, education, and training. Just imagine, 8.9 million people who are young at between those ages, 15 and 34, are not in any education, not any employment, not any training. because under capitalism, people survive by buying commodities, meaning that then there are 8.9 million people who cannot buy any commodity, cannot buy any service. Those who are unemployed then are left and condemned into poverty. The combination of poverty and dismal low wages has widened inequalities in which the few who are filthy rich possesses more than 90% of the country's wealth, whilst the overwhelming majority, the 90% of the population, must share only 10% of the country's wealth. So, flowing from that, you know, is the levels of the stress in society, which makes us to be the second most depressed nation in the whole world. And flowing from that depression is the crisis of suicide, in particular amongst the younger men. And flowing from that 8.9 million people who are not in any kind of employment, training, and education is the crisis of drug epidemic that is hitting in the main the black youth. And out of that is the violence and criminality that all of us are speaking about. So our crisis of criminality is directly flowing from the fact that the ANC government has for 29 years now simply failed to address even the most basic demand of our people for employment. We make another example, number 5, about austerity and corruption. Despite his utterances that he was not delivering an austerity budget, Minister Enoch Godongwana delivered an austerity budget. From this financial year of 2022-2023 to 2023-2024, he is carrying out nominal cuts and real cuts in health, agriculture, rural development, police, home affairs, and courts and prisons. Exacerbating the budget cuts is the endemic corruption in government and private sector. Former head of procurement at Treasury, Kenneth Brown, told us ages ago that this country loses between 35 and 40% of the government procurement budget to corruption and tender fraud. Concretely, this is lost to asbestos corruption in the Free State, to COVID-19 corruption all over the country, to money that is meant to build stadiums and recreational facilities, as we have seen even in my township in Sada and Queenstown, digital vibes that led to the death of Diokoran, Tembisa Hospital looting spree of tiny-skinned jeans, and many countless incidents of stealing. We make another example to show you that we are actually in a failed state. The academic and financial exclusions. The recent wave of protest by students is a classic expression of revolt against academic and financial exclusions of the working class children from the universities. The more than 4 million applications by prospective students when 20 universities collectively had less than 200,000 spaces in 2023. Just listen to that. 20 million applications. And yet, 4 million applications for only 200,000 spaces in 2023 at our universities. Graphically demonstrate that this crime against young people, which is perpetrated by austerity programs, refusal to invest and build more universities in our country, and celebrating how many universities? 2. One in the Northern Cape, one in Mpumalanga. 9 years. That's all we're celebrating. The result is what you see there. Government is effectively saying to young people, we are trampling on your constitutional rights. We are trampling on your constitutional rights, and we don't care. And further, it is saying, if you dare fight for this right to education, we will brutalize you. We have police on our side. You sitting where you are at home know of many examples of how this state is no more to protect even the most basic rights that accrue from Section 27 of the Constitution. The right to clean water, the right to education, the right to a job, the right to clean air and environment, and the right to security. This is the program of action that emerged from this NEC. Despite the glaring crisis, the working class remains divided, fragmented, and weakened more than ever before. We accept that. The working class has because of these weaknesses, failed to offer a coherent alternative to this worsening crisis of capitalism. We have no movement for socialism in place that can take up the battles against the structural crisis and mobilize the poor against the unfolding crisis of capitalism. The NEC agreed to urgently reconvene the Political and Ideological Commission, the Campaigns Committee, the Working Class Summit, the Conference of the Left Summit, to help unite and put to an end the fragmentization and the sectarian approaches in which small and ineffective but still militant protest actions that lack coordination at all national levels or at the national levels are taking place every day. But unfortunately, the situation is getting worse with all of those small, uncoordinated national protest actions. The Second National Congress held in May 2023, the July 2022 NEC, and now this NEC at the end of February, has issued a clarion call for the Federation to rebuild itself from bottom up. This will include taking forward all of the directives contained in the Integrated Operational Plan adopted by the NEC in July, such as ensuring recruitment, service to members, education and training for leaders and officials, and so forth. We recognize that the internal divisions within SAFTU made us lose yet another moment, the 2018 moment, in which we burst into prominence by organizing the biggest protest action not seen in a long time in our history, post-1994. SAFTU leaders are committed to leave no stone unturned in forging and strengthening unity, confronting difficulties and differences in order to ensure that we fully embrace the call of the Second National Congress to stop being inward-looking. SAFTU NEC received a report from the meeting between the SAFTU leadership and the leadership of the EFF regarding the request of the EFF that SAFTU form part of the national shutdown scheduled for the 20th of March 2023. The NEC resolved that SAFTU will participate in the national shutdown. This means that we will galvanize and mobilize our own members to join the national shutdown across the country. In fact, we have submitted a Section 77 notice this morning to NEDLEC to protect all workers in and outside the Federation. This means any worker, even if they are not member of any union, including the Federation itself, will be protected from victimization by the employers when they participate in that digital shutdown. However, our participation has conditions which have been ironed out in a discussion with the leadership of the EFF. And these include: 1, working to ensure that the 20th of March initial shutdown is not sectarian, where all other formations will be called upon to join a program of one political party. SAFTU insist that we are happy that the EFF has agreed that the broadest possible front of the working class formations be mobilized as the advanced detachment of the working class to mobilize effectively for the initial shutdown, meaning that SAFTU is not willing to just join a political party's programs. We can't do that. We are an independent federation. We can only join a broad front of left formations working together to achieve a common goal of an effective national shutdown on the 20th. We see this broadest front as the beginning of the foundations for the creation of a national minimum program and platform that can unite all left-leaning trade union federations, the left political movements, the working class formations, and other progressive non-governmental organizations. That's our first precondition. And luckily, we've already engaged with the EFF leadership on this, and we're at one. Secondly, we'll develop this minimum program, or rather, let me repeat, to develop this minimum program, the demands of the 20th March national shutdown must be broadened to include all the current socio-economic demands of SAFTU and other working class formations. SAFTU has a principal demand, which include creation of decent work by rebuilding our manufacturing base and through re-industrialization of our country. We are insisting, as part of our demands, that the escalation of the cost of living through not only restructuring of the economy, but the introduction of the basic income grant must be one of the core demands of the 20th of March shutdown. Increasing the national minimum wage towards the 12,500 that the Marikana workers died for, and above the national minimum poverty line, and in particular above the food inflation and the food basket that a family of 5 needs in order to survive every month, which is about 4,600 rands a month. In our view, no worker must earn below those wages in South Africa, be they in the farm, security, cleaning sector, informal sector, everywhere. This country must share in the wealth that it produces, and particularly the wealth that is being produced by the working people. We insist that part of those brought-in campaign must include a campaign for a living wage and forcing the employers not to cheat, combating crime and criminality, in particular directed against women, children, the vulnerable elderly, stopping the process of privatization of the state-owned enterprises at Eskom, in the South African Post Office, in Transnet, in PRASA, in the airlines, everywhere where government is now embarking on the program to privatize state-owned enterprises. Ending load shedding and ending neoliberal austerity programs that are centered on budget cuts. We will require that the Federation, or this will require that the Federation's leadership meet with the EFF as soon as possible to make sure that we develop this broad front. We work together with that broad front, and so that this becomes a initial shutdown of a working class broadest front possible that will work together in a non-sectarian fashion. In addition to the initial shutdown, SAFTU NEC has resolved to support the court action against the government declaring the state of national disaster on the ongoing load shedding lodged by our affiliate NUMSA. This case will be heard in the South Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg on the 20th of March, 2023. SAFTU calls on workers to also participate and join the NUMSA activists who will be picketing outside the Johannesburg High Court on the 20th of March. Our support for the court action against the declaration of the state of disaster on load shedding is informed by the government. Government will not follow regulatory framework in the process of procurement. Therefore, looting to the scale of the COVID-19 corruption and even more is imminent. The hyenas are already standing on the side waiting, with saliva falling from their mouth, to do exactly what they did in 2020, 2021, and 2022 during the COVID crisis. Government can't take the country back to that looting spree we witness. Government will use this state of disaster to toss aside or disregard collective agreements struck between unions organizing at Eskom. 3, government will want to override the court challenges based on environmental concerns by various organizations. Government will speed up the auctioning of the energy generation to private sector through these independent power producers. We cannot allow that to happen. If government wants to procure services, it must follow open and transparent tender systems. If government wants to introduce other measures to combat load shedding, including tapping on the gas, it must observe the environmental regulations and laws of the country. If government wants to bring in these car power ships in the seas, it must follow the law. It can't want to sideline everything by introducing these disaster regulations. However, we would like to insist that the relief measures that would have been given to the small traders in the fast food outlets, internet cafes, to other small businesses, and workers retrenched as a result of load shedding be provided even when the state of disaster is struck down. We want those. On May Day, the 134th May Day celebrations will be held in Durban under the theme celebrating the 50th anniversary of the historic Durban strikes, returning to the values of 1973. 5 other rallies will be organized in Polokwane, Johannesburg, Mangaung, Gqeberha, and Ladysmith in the Western Cape. SAFTU will strive to champion internal democracy, worker control, and unity of workers in the trade union movement, taking cue from the Durban strikes. We will remind ourselves that there is a social distance between leaders and their base, between organized labor and community organizations, between organized labor and the student formations. Through our efforts to build a working class summit, we are attempting to bridge this gap and ensure that the broadest possible unity of the working class is possible. Such unity is necessary and urgent in order to remove the thugs and crooks leading us in government, and together with our allies in our class, our brothers and sisters in that class across the entire world, we can fight to abolish the system of capitalism itself. That's the end of the statement.
Thanks, Robert. Let me take questions from if there's any on our Facebook platform. There's none. Okay, we'll proceed to take questions from the House. You may indicate by raising your hands, and we will give you the mic to pose such questions. The floor is yours.
Is that the only mic?
Good afternoon. My name is Shutdown from the SABC. I wanted to find out about the national state of disaster. You're saying that you've launched a section, if I'm not mistaken, section 77 with NEC to protect all the workers here. So how will this work out? Is it going to be basically around companies? Maybe a company decides to say that we are firing you because you're not on duty on the day. Will we see SAFTU then taking this case head on to try and protect the workers that may be in the receiving end where this is concerned. And also around, I wanted to check in with SAFTU on the issues of the public servants workers. I haven't seen you touch at length in terms of what is happening there in the statement here. What is SAFTU's position where that is concerned? We're hearing other unions, other federations more or less have concluded that they're going to be going on an indefinite strike action sometime this month. What is SAFTU's standing point where that process is concerned?
Thanks. Let's maybe respond and then we'll take.
I think you should respond on the public sector first.
Okay. So, in the context of the public servants or the public service unions, we of course will have seen through the media that SAPU left us late last year. We were left with NUPSO. So the union which represents the public servants unions in SAFTU is NUPSO. And NUPSO is coordinating together with the very SAPU, but also with other unions in COSATU. And this coordination, of course, has been going on. They've decided in a meeting which took place last week that they will all submit notices for a strike. And we have seen already that Nehau has submitted that notice and released it. NUPSO will of course submit this week. We would have to be hearing from them sooner. But all of those who were participating in that meeting, including NUPSO itself, decided to submit such a notice.
Thank you so much, Katleva, and thank you for your question. I think the question that is related to Section 77, how does it work? This is the notice that we have submitted to NETLEC under socio-economic challenges. And this notice, it covers everyone, including yourselves as media representatives. Each and every worker, irrespective of your workplace, are covered by this notice. And of course, we do have workers that belongs to essential services. And you know that these are the workers that are excluded in terms of participating or participating in any strike action. But all workers are protected, and none of the employers would want to pursue any disciplinary action post the 20th of March national action. But everyone is protected.
Are you not 80?
No.
Are there further questions, or we have no questions?
There's a question at the back.
Okay, there are two questions. Can I start?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My name is Ramadhan from XFM. I just wanted to find out, now that the move is to join EFF political party, you are taking that invitation. I want to find out if EFF ever showed any solidarity to the workers' strike, especially during last year when the public sector unions were on the street. Did EFF ever show any solidarity on that? And then what message I'm saying to members who are not even aligned to EFF? How are you going to lobby other unions affiliated to COSATU? Don't you think this move, joining the political party, will further fragment the working class? I just wanted to clarity on that. Will we see EFF maybe later on also take a favor to the plight of the working class? Thank you very much.
That's the first one. Why can't they allow even the second one? Why can't they allow the second one?
Robert again from the SABC. I wanted to find out also about this decision to support the national shutdown with the EFF. Could we maybe say that this is an indication of SAFTU maybe supporting the EFF in the polls in 2024? Looking at the fact that right now where we are, most political parties are trying by all means to form alliances so that come 2024 they've got that support. Also around the issue of SAFTU, did this issue, was it discussed during the NEC? And what is your standing point with SAFTU? Have you tried by all means to reach out to them and those concerns that they raised when they were pulling out of the federation to stand alone? Were those discussed, and what is the way forward around some of these issues that are creeping up? And also you're saying that you're supporting NUMSA, where that court process against the declaration of a national state of disaster is concerned. What is the relationship right now with the Federation and NUMSA? Because we know over the years there have been those frictions between the leadership of NUMSA and the leadership of SAFTU. Are they in good standing? When you're supporting them right here with this collection, is this an indication that maybe probably lost grounds have been gained here? And also the issue of the public sector, looming public sector strike. NUMSO is your affiliate. What have they told you as a federation regarding the talks that they've been having with the COSATU coordinating council, where this issues of the shutdown is concerned? Will you be supporting their core as SAFTU? We don't really get to see you playing an active role. It's just NUMSO that we see them at these press briefings where they're talking about the public sector workers and their plight. What is your standing point, especially where this issue of the workers are concerned? Also coming over the fact that last year the government moved to implement the 3%, and now we have a fresh round of talks that have started for the new financial year. Okay.
Thanks.
I'll answer where I can. Comrade Ramadama of Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you are already beginning to misrepresent the NEC decision, which I tried to explain. Let me explain again. I said that we are going to form part of the 20th of March shutdown. I didn't use deliberately. And the statement of the NEC doesn't use deliberately joining. There's a difference between forming part and joining an activity of another party. We will form part, that's what we are saying. And we are doing so not unconditionally. The first condition we have just read to you, leaders, is that we want a non-sectarian protest where in the broadest possible front of the working class formations work together to ensure that the 20th of March becomes an overwhelming success. That's our position, President. Is there any other way of putting it? DGS. That's our position. So when we say we will be working with the EFF, and they've already given us the guarantee, by the way, that they are not going to invite a trade union to join a sectarian, a narrow political party program where unions become an add-on. We will never join such a thing. We will join and we will form part of a broad front of left-leaning political parties, not one party. In that we want all of them in. And the EFF has already assured us that it is actually speaking to AZAPO, to the Black Consciousness Movement, and it is speaking to the PAC, it is speaking to the various socialist formations of political organizations, and it is also speaking to, we asked them, we said, no, you have to speak to COSATU. We want them in. We are not interested in sectarian approaches to protest action. COSATU is a very important formation of workers in South Africa, irrespective of our disapproval of their alliance with the butchers of the working class. Invite them. And the EFF says, we will do so. We say, thank you very much. We said, invite AMCO, speak to NUMSA, speak to everybody, so that it's not just an add-on situation. It's a broad front of formations. We will participate and we will form part once we are absolutely happy that this is a broad front of left-leaning formations in our country. I was answering you as well, my leader from the SAPC. That's what we mean. That's what we're saying in relation to that. We have already dispatched a letter to the leadership of the EFF to say now that the NEC says let's go forward together with others. Let's now operationalize that. Let's meet and let's make sure that this program is not a sectarian one political party where others are invited. But it is a beginnings of a development of a minimum program that is capable of uniting the broadest possible front of political formations, of progressive NGOs, of federations, of working class formations. That's what we are working towards, and that's what we hope that we will be able to do in the now practical theater of the struggle. I'm glad that you asked that question so that we can get the opportunity to clarify that again. On the
No, the SAFTU,
and I can comment as well to this. Okay. Maybe just to respond to the question, I think it's also related to the EFF, asked by Katleo, that is this the indication that we will be supporting EFF in the next polls? We need to reiterate our position that SAFTU is an independent workers' federation. And be that as it may, we are apolitical. That does not mean that we are not engaging on political affairs of this country. And the inaugural Congress of SAFTU made mention that we need to have a discussion that will lead towards the formation of the Workers' Party. And we reiterate what we said until such time the political and ideological commission, which is the structure that was formed by the Congress in terms of advancing the discussion towards that. We are still in the discussion towards that. There are differences in terms of views and approach, but as things stand, SAFTU, we don't support any political party. Until such time, there's pronunciation internally. We don't support any political party. But when it comes to the programs, issues that are affecting working class, just like what the General Secretary has said today, we will support, but not the protests or activities that are sectarian in nature. And there's also a question that is related to SAFTU, which is a South African police union. SAFTU is one of the founding unions of SAFTU. And we respect
together with
Wainudu, which is the young workers, young nurses Indaba Trade Union. These are the founding trade unions in SAFTU. Way back from 2015, while we were still dealing with the summit up to until having the formation SAFTU. After we received the letter of termination, disaffiliating from SAFTU, we immediately wrote, because of that letter was not stating any reasons, we immediately wrote the letter to the leadership of SAPO and indicating that we want to have bilaterals so that we can get understanding as to what are the reasons that made them to disaffiliate from SAFTU. And maybe stating from some of the reasons that were stated from media, but they responded to us that they need to go and source the mandate from the National Executive Committee. Once they source that mandate, they will indicate as to what is their way forward. The NEC spoke about that and they reiterated that we need to make it everything and anything in ensuring that we persuade SAFTU, we persuade Juanitu to come back to the Federation. So we're in the process of doing that. And there's also another question that is related to NUMSA, the relationship with SAFTU. NUMSA is an affiliate of SAFTU. I am a member of NUMSA in good standing. So debates will ensue, robustly so, there will be differences in opinion, but that doesn't mean that there's division. Yes, in terms of approach, there and there will be differences in the manner in which other affiliates internally, including NUMSA. But that doesn't mean that we can say the relationship of NUMSA and SAPO. NUMSA is the biggest affiliate in SAFTU, and we value the contribution that NUMSA is contributing to internal resources and everything that you can talk about. Like I said, that I'm a member of NUMSA in good standing. NUMSA is a member of SAFTU. And then there's a last question that is related to talking about the 3%, the implementation of 3%, how we coordinating the talks. I think our spokesperson is someone who's deployed in that platform. He can be able to give more details pertaining to that.
Just before he does that,
Yes.
can I just, before that, President, just emphasize one point. When the statement says we have had a very successful, peaceful, friendly, comradely debates in the NEC, all that happened with NUMSA's participation is not excluded from that statement. NUMSA was in the NEC for 3 days. And we refer to their own participation in the NEC debates. It was friendly, it was robust, it was comradely, and it was with like all of the things that we are saying in the statement. When we come to the NUPSO coordination, of course NUPSO briefed the NEC, including about the difficulties that are now emerging in terms of coherency or lack of coherency in the unity that we thought was developing in the public sector, PSCPC. And that disturbed us, because throughout 2022, something that had never happened before was beginning to happen in the public sector. The unions across all the federations were joining hands together, were speaking in one voice, were holding demonstrations together. That excited SAFTU, because that's exactly what we've been campaigning for since our inception in 2017. And we would have thought that that unity will be sustained into 2023 going forward, because it is actually the lack of unity in the public sector that have made government to be so arrogant and to play the divide and rule trick that have made it possible for government to impose a wage freeze on the public sector workers and or to insult them with this once-off gratuity that is not pensionable, and or to give them way below inflation rate increases, and in some years just to refuse to implement the agreement that it signed with the public sector, citing the coronavirus as an excuse. It has all been possible to do that because government is thriving on the disunity of the public sector workers, who are the mostly organized sector in the economy, but unfortunately the fragmentization and the many unions that exist have been making it very difficult to coordinate a joint activity. We are extremely disappointed that as we're beginning 2023, that unity is dissipating. The FEDUSA unions are pursuing a strategy of going back to negotiations and suggesting that they have given up on fighting against the unilateral implementation of the 3% that government imposed in November last year. And they are saying that now they are going to pursue the government in the fresh negotiations of 2023. And unfortunately, they are forgetting that what confronted them in 2023 will confront them again in 2022, rather. What confronted them